In the harsh wilderness of the Gobi Desert, there lives a terrifying creature. A meter-long worm that feeds on humans and is able to spit a corrosive acid and electrocute its prey from a distance. The ferocious Mongolian death worm. Well, that's what the legends say at least. The story of this mystery animal is a fascinating one, with locals telling tales of the alarming ways in which it hunts and referring to it as Olgoi Korkoi, meaning large intestine worm due to its apparent red coloration and overall resemblance to an intestine. And many people living in the areas the worm is said to inhabit are apparently genuinely fearful of this cryptid. The interest in this creature by Westerners can be traced back to when it was mentioned by American naturalist and explorer Roy Chapman Andrews, famous for leading expeditions into the Gobi Desert where he found fossilized dinosaur eggs and made other remarkable discoveries. In his 1926 book On the Trail of Ancient Man, Andrews described how he had heard stories about this creature circulating in Mongolia, yet the people telling him these tales had not witnessed the cryptid themselves but absolutely believed that it existed. Andrews himself was not convinced by the legend of the death worm. However, the story had now solidified itself in the Western literature as an interesting mystery animal that many later cryptozoologists would be eager to investigate. In 1944, other sources say 1954, a short story written by Soviet paleontologist and science fiction writer Ivan Yefremov called Olgoi Korkoi popularized the creature, as did its featuring in several cryptozoological books. The tales of this beast that emanated from Mongolia were thought by some to be too numerous and similar in ways for it all to be a coincidence or some sort of misidentified snake. These cryptozoologists were convinced there had to be a basis to the death worm. As a result, a few different expeditions have been made over the years by Westerners to find out the truth of what this worm is. The first of these notable expeditions to the Gobi Desert took place in 1990 and was led by Czech cryptozoologist Ivan Makerl, the man responsible for much of the popularizing of this cryptid, as he was the one who highlighted Andrews' description of the legend in more modern publications and realized its significance. After examining the little literature on the death worm that existed at that point in time, Makerl set off for Mongolia with a small group of friends. They didn't find any evidence of its existence, but Makerl returned in 1992 to search once more. Despite apparently constructing thumping devices to try and lower the cryptid to the surface, inspired by Frank Herbert's Dune, Makerl's expeditions failed to locate any death worms, but he still wrote accounts of the adventures for a couple of Czech magazines which were then later translated to English. What Makerl and his team did encounter on their journeys were a lot of stories told by locals. A group of Mongolian nomads that they made friends with explained how the death worms could spit acid that instantly corroded anything and caused it to turn a shade of yellow. In addition, the colour yellow would apparently attract more worms. The nomads also recounted a tale of a young boy who had been playing outside with a yellow ball and who was then followed indoors by a worm. When the boy touched the worm, it killed him instantly, and when the parents tried to track down the creature afterwards, it killed them too. Another local they spoke to also said she'd heard many stories of the cryptid and knew that it was capable of raising its body out of the sand and squirting venom, but she had never actually seen the worm herself. These unsuccessful but not uninteresting missions didn't stop others from trying to find the death worm, however. Other notable attempts include a 2005 expedition led by Richard Freeman of the Center for Fortean Zoology. They didn't find anything either and concluded that the worm was perhaps based on encounters with an as yet unknown species of Amphisbaenian, a worm lizard, which are actually squamates and therefore closely related to snakes and lizards. There's a whole documentary made by the members of this expedition on YouTube, I'll link to it below. There are some interesting interviews with locals featured in it, in which some mention the worm used to be a far more common sight than it is now, and others in which people are almost certainly reporting snakes. From 2006 to 2007, there was also an attempt to find the death worm as part of the reality TV show Destination Truth on Sci-Fi, but again no good evidence was uncovered. In 2009, the New Zealand TV entertainment reporter David Farrier tried to find the worm as well, however also failed to secure any physical evidence of its existence. The National Geographic show Beast Hunter, or Beast Man in the UK, also aired an episode in 2011 in which they attempted to search for Olgoi Korkoi and even set out camera traps overnight, but, as you may have noticed is a bit of a trend with this cryptid, found no solid evidence of the worm. There doesn't seem to have been an expedition for a while though, so I've always wanted to go to the Gobi Desert. Anyone want to come on the next Mongolian death worm search with me? One of next year's Worm Week videos perhaps. Anyway, the evidence for the Mongolian death worm is not great. In fact, it's pretty much entirely based on second-hand accounts. Several attempts have been made over the years to try and get some footage, specimens, or any sort of hard verifiable evidence, but they've all come up empty-handed. It would appear that there's less evidence for the existence of the worm than even many other very doubtful cryptids. What could the death worm really be then? A variety of explanations have been offered, including that it's simply a fabrication, or that it's based on encounters with either known or unknown species of snakes or amphibians, as was favoured by Freeman after his expedition. It's also been pointed out that if there really is a death worm, it's very unlikely to be an actual worm, as in an earthworm within the Annelida phylum, since they can't survive in dry desert sands due to the need to keep their skin moist in order to breathe. This provides another implication in favour of a snake or amphibian classification. However, the mystery of the Mongolian deathworm's true identity may actually have been solved a while ago, nearly 40 years ago in fact. A 2017 Russian publication called The Amphibians of Mongolia details within it the legend of Olgoy Korkoy, recounting how it came to Western attention and the stories told of its lethal powers. But it then includes an interesting anecdote of a zoologist named Yuri Gorilov who had worked a great deal in Mongolia during the 70s, and who in 1983 said he showed a specimen of a Tartar sandboa to the local people of the Gobi, which they confirmed was the Olgoy Korkoy and were apparently afraid of it. So, is that the mystery solved? It certainly adds some more good evidence to the snake idea. It's not too difficult to imagine that the Mongolian deathworm really is based on an actual living organism that inhabits the Gobi Desert, but that this animal is not a mystical creature with superpowers and instead is some kind of venomous snake that's probably a good idea to avoid. To ensure that children or unwary travellers wouldn't go off into the desert and get too close to these dangerous snakes, it's then not out of the question that alarming stories about Olgoy Korkoy could have been created. A creature that can instantly kill you if you get too close to it, as a sort of cautionary tale that dissuades people from approaching potentially life-threatening animals. Similar situations can be seen with other cryptids, especially those associated with bodies of water, where frightening myths about lake monsters or sea serpents arise as the result of a sense of wariness about a location that could harbour some very real threats. Of course, it could turn out that there really is some kind of unknown snake or amphibian at the root of all these stories, but so far the evidence for it is just not that good. Well, there's the Mongolian deathworm then. An interesting cryptid that doesn't quite seem as likely to be real as some others, but that could very much be an exaggeration of an already known animal. It's still a pretty cool concept, and who knows, perhaps future expeditions to the Gobi Desert will reveal some amazing animals we don't know about yet, though I have a feeling they're more likely to be the fossils of extinct animals than specimens of living mystery ones. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Worm Week, and there's actually a bonus Worm Week episode that you can watch now up on my mum's channel One World, all about why worms are so important for life on Earth. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to our Patreon supporters, especially our Dinosaur Tier supporters Corey Peterson, George Vojtek, Mayor's World, Nicole Bueno, Pasta, Mark Fawn, Dominic Bathy, and Alex Hawke. If you would like to find out more about worms, their history, and the wonderful worms that surround us all, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you think we deserve it, and if you would like to see more from us.